We are just over 12 hours until free agency starts in the NHL, and it's crunch time for the Florida Panthers. On this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be bringing in Jacob Winans from PantherParkway.com to talk about where the Panthers stand and their cap situation, all on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, July 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. We'll be covering all the off-season activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, we are in a bit of a situation now. If you would have asked me a week ago where the Florida Panthers would be just over 12 hours before the free agency, you would think that there would be a cap clearing trade now. But it's just crazy with the free agent frenzy that's about to happen with a whole bunch of stars that are about to hit the open market, but not a lot of money to go around. With a whole bunch of players hitting the market, let's give a few examples. Johnny Gaudreau is no longer gonna be part of the Calgary Flames. Nazem Kadri is one as well. Those are just to name two. John Klimberg of the Dallas Stars is gonna be testing the open market as well. And those are a few of the names that are going to be hitting the market. And it's crazy. Like I said, not a lot of money to go around for each of these NHL franchises. But let me actually bring in my guest here on the show, Jacob Winans here. Jacob, we're just over 12 hours from the start of free agency, and I want to get your feelings heading into as we are over 12 hours away.
Oh man, it's nervous times. Not a whole lot of money to go around, and the Panthers are on the very low end of the cap space spectrum right now. So we really are in a position where we're hoping Zito can pull a rabbit out of his hat and see what we can make happen here. It's going to be an interesting few hours coming up.
Absolutely, and I made the mistake last Friday of having my phone down. And then Etu and Lucas Carlson had their extensions. So I found myself checking and refreshing Twitter all day today, and it's going to continue even throughout the show. In case there is breaking news in the world of the Florida Panthers. But let's talk a little bit about the state of the Panthers and, of course, the state of the NHL as well. Another qualifying offer has been handed out for the Panthers. No terms and numbers yet, but Henry Bolby, undrafted left winger and center, will be qualified and offered. And that's the last player that will be qualified and offer for the Florida Panthers. I'm going to guess it's going to be probably a two-way deal, two-way contract for Henry Bolby. Great story, him being undrafted and now getting another crack at it for the Florida Panthers and the Charlotte Checkers, more than likely. But also, some former Panthers have been bought out by the Chicago Blackhawks, and we're talking about former first-round pick Henrik Borgstrom, drafted by Tom Rowe, approved by Dale Talon, and Brett Connolly, a Dale Talon signing just in 2019 Stanley Cup champion, part of that trade that brought Lucas Carlsson to the mix of the Panthers, and looking like that's a pretty good deal for Bill Zito and company with being able to extend Carlsson. We talked a little about it earlier this week about how great it is to extend him, but now we have the buyout. It's a sad story for someone like Henrik Borgstrom, who just hasn't really gone up to what his draft stock was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I really did like Borgie in his time here. But yeah, it's another story of kind of failed development on both the Panthers end, but also the Blackhawks end towards the back half. But as far as the Panthers, he just never really showed it at the NHL level. Had issues getting up to the necessary weight that they wanted him to. There were stories and rumors that I can't confirm this because I don't know how he was personally feeling, but there were rumors that he just wasn't as motivated, didn't put the work in necessary in camp, and a couple of years the coaching staff was not satisfied with what they saw from him in his off-season work. So it's unfortunate. Hopefully he lands on his feet. I would not be shocked at all to see him leave the NHL entirely, go over to Finland or elsewhere in Europe and try to rebuild his game. Still young enough where he could have an NHL future, but it's unfortunate. He was a Hobey Baker finalist, a national champion at the NCAA level. He was absolutely fantastic in college. So we really did think he had a bright future in the NHL, and it didn't pan out. But getting Lucas Carlsson out of it, that's a big win. Carlsson is a guy that was kind of a afterthought in that trade, and he's now solidified himself as a player on the Panthers, and I think he's got a bright future ahead. And then as far as Brett Connolly goes, that free agency period, Dale Talon's signings there, that looks pretty dicey now, looking back on it. Zito had to get rid of assets to move Anton Strawman, had to, and one of those was Vlad Kolyachonok, who made his NHL debut last year with Arizona as a defenseman. Had to get rid of assets to part with Brett Connolly, and now he's bought out. So those signings don't look too great. Nola Chari panned out for the most part, and the book is still out on Bob, but that off season is not.
I remember the press conference with Strawman there, Bobrovsky, Connolly, all of them together, and it felt like as if there was like a little bit of that last gasp of hope during Dale Talon's tenure with the Panthers, only for the Panthers not to even look the least bit competitive against the New York Islanders in the Stanley Cup bubble. And that's just how you knew at that time that changes had to be made for the Panthers. And now with the Chicago Blackhawks buying out those two players, of course, they trade for Peter Mrazek, which is just throwing in the towel for the season, at least for the next few seasons. And now they're in a situation where Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane possibly could be forcing their way out. And I feel like these moves by Kyle Davidson is just forcing their hands to just have them walk to them and say, hey, I want out now, instead of just doing it on their own, because of course those are franchise legends there. And I was talking to you about this pre-recording, and Kevin Weeks was talking about this today as well. And Patrick Kane and the New York Rangers sounds like it kind of sounds like a match made in heaven, reuniting with Artemi Panarin, which it's still mind-boggling that that the Chicago Blackhawks let Artemi Panarin go after winning a Calder Trophy. But Patrick Kane reuniting with Artemi Panarin, I can very well see him possibly being traded over there.
Yeah, Kane to the Rangers seems like a story, but kind of, Patrick Kane is arguably the best offensive player to ever come out of the United States. Just a Team USA legend, an American hockey legend is really the only word for it. So I could really see him fitting in a place like New York. New York is, whether we like him or hate him, New York is pretty much the center of entertainment, and it's really the mecca of sports in the United States at times. So I think Patrick Kane wearing a blue sweater in MSG, that would make a lot of sense. And then him and Artemi Panarin were lethal in Chicago, and that was before Panarin really hit his ceiling. I think he's there now. He's at the peak of his prime, and putting him with Kane would be it would be an interesting fit. I think they do very well there. A line of Zibanejad, Panarin, Kane is pretty scary to me, so I could really see it happening. The question is what the Rangers would have to give up. But if Kane wants to stay competitive at the end of his career and have another shot at some playoff runs, I think New York is a place he could do it.
And now that the Rangers are out on Andrew Kopp, maybe this sounds like another chess move to possibly get it, but I don't think it's going to be immediate, this trade. I think it's going to be waiting until the trade deadline come next season for that. As far as Jonathan Toews' trade value, I'm not sure where it's at based on the recent injuries for him. And it took a little bit of, I think it took him until January to score his first goal of the season, if I'm not mistaken. So just injuries have been an issue kind of for Jonathan Toews in recent years. So hoping that Jonathan Toews, of course, he brings the leadership factor, of course, to any team that he brings, a three-time Stanley Cup champion. So hoping the best for those guys, as those guys are just legends. As I was coming up and watching this sport, those are the two names that, of course, that resemble most to me as far as the league as a whole. So I'm hoping that those two guys end up in great spots.
Yeah, definitely. Toews, his trade value, we don't know what that is given his health concerns and his lack of offense lately, but he wasn't exactly playing with the greatest of line mates necessarily in Chicago. He was kind of up and down the lines, but he is getting older. I think as far as his trade value, I think whatever ends up happening, Chicago probably retains salary. But I still think he could fetch a good return, and Patrick Kane obviously would get a massive haul wherever he ends up going. And like you said, the Rangers are a team that have the assets to pull that off. But wherever those two end up, it'd be interesting to see them play on separate teams for the first time in their career. But yeah, I think both of them do have enough left in the tank to contribute elsewhere. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Absolutely. But there's still so much more to talk about when it comes to the state of the NHL, who's going to go where. We're going to talk about the Panthers and what they could be, where they could go, and where we expected them to be, and of course where they are now. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest developments, including league reviews and news, including this year's NHL free agency and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continuous source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and event, including MMA, boxing, and golf. And of course, with the British Open being this week, you could put in some of your golf bets at the very iconic venue of the Old Course in St. Andrews. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show, and we're live on YouTube as you guys can see watching right now. And people listening on the audio version, this will be an early release due to this type of season with free agency and of course the draft that just passed last week. Things can get outdated very quickly. So you guys on the audio version listening to this, you guys will get Winans Wednesday a little bit early. But let's talk about the cap situation for the Panthers. We knew for a few days now that with their extensions of their RFAs that number was going to dwindle a little slowly back to zero for their cap space. And we were thinking once again that they were going to have some type of cap clearing move. And here we are, exactly at 10 o'clock on the dot p.m. on a Tuesday night, talking about the Panthers and where they are, and still less than $1 million of cap space. And like I said, I caught myself scrolling a little bit more than usual on Twitter today, anticipating a type of move, and to no avail. And I'm not going to lie to you, Jacob. I was a week ago, I was very confident that something would happen. Now I'm a little nervous, not going to lie.
Yeah. It kind of makes you wonder, what's going on in there. Especially with Anthony Duclair's injury, you got to assume there has to be something done to keep some of our offense together, especially in the top 6. Obviously, we're not necessarily at 0, because with Duclair's injury, you can put him on LTIR for however long is necessary and use that $3 million. But the 2 free agents that are the biggest names that we're discussing for as far as retaining, I don't think either of them are in the area of a $3 million contract. I think both of them would command something higher than that. So, and of course, we're talking about Marchment and Giroux here. And the reports that Marchment wants something at least around the range of what Verhaeghe got, $4 million a year, seems reasonable. I can't fault him for wanting that. And right now, the Panthers just simply don't have it. Claude Giroux, you can't ask him to take too much of a pay cut. I know he's a veteran. He's going to have teams that are also contenders that can offer him more money. Talk about a team like Carolina, a team like Edmonton who's been interested. They made a conference final appearance. So these are teams that are going to have more money to offer, but can also say, hey, we made a deep playoff run too. Come here, get paid, and also have a shot at the cup. So, it's a little bit concerning. As far as Hornqvist goes, the guy we thought would be the obvious sacrificial lamb for cap clearing move, he's still on the roster. The buyout period has passed. I really don't know. Maybe there's a trade already in place. Maybe he's looking at a package deal, Hornqvist and someone else. It's really hard. It's really anyone's guess. But it would, worst case scenario. I don't know how much we're set back next season if we end up losing Marchment, losing Giroux, and obviously Duclair is not going to be available the first half of the year. It puts us in a position where we're filling a lot of holes, and that's not a good spot to be in.
And I'll say this. What would a buyout have looked like for Hornqvist had they gone that route? The buyout period's passed, so it's not happening. But had they gone that route, it would have been 1.7 of dead cap this year and 1.7 of dead cap next year. Scott Darling's cap hit on the team would be gone next year, and it would just be a $500 a year difference for next year. So if you're thinking about it as far as a year from now, not so bad. But you're thinking about if you were to go that route this year and you add all the dead cap with Yandel, Darling, and Hornqvist, that's $8.3 million of dead cap on their salary cap. So I don't know. It doesn't look good when you're just scrolling around Cap Friendly and looking at that. I think Zito is trying to find a way to retain Zero. And the fact that he didn't go that buyout route tells me that maybe there's something in place. But, of course, there has to be a dance partner on the other side.
Yeah, I don't think Zito would be willing to enter free agency completely crippled as far as what he's able to do to make moves. If he felt like there's no trade partner, I really do think Hornqvist would have been bought out today. I feel like there is a trade partner out there. I think there's somewhere that they'd be willing to send him to, and someone who's willing to take him on at full salary or close to it. But I don't see Bill Zito entering free agency knowing he has zero room to make any moves at all. No, that's not to say we're not going to have to get creative with some of the signings. Definitely going to have to be some good creative depth signings, league minimum type guys who can come in and contribute on low salary. But I can't see a scenario where Bill Zito enters free agency with under $1 million in cap space, doesn't retain any of his guys, and we just roll into next season with what we have. I can't picture a scenario like that. So I feel like there must be someone who's willing to take on Bob, or not Bob, that'd be interesting. Someone who's willing to take on Hornqvist. And yeah, I don't want to throw too much into the Mackenzie Weegar discussions that came out today, but if there's a bigger package to be put together, and clear cap, maybe that's something that could be in the works. You don't really know, but I think at the very least, Hornqvist is a guy who I would be shocked if he's still a Panther by this time tomorrow night.
And this is a completely different situation than for what the Yandel buyout was at this point last year, because the terms in the contract, because Yandel had a full no move clause that made it really hard for anyone to trade for him. And at this point last year, there was an expansion draft, and forcing to protect Yandel, Gustav Forsling would not have been on this roster. Like I'm very certain. I know they signed Chris Drieger as the Panthers pick, but I had a feeling at the time that it would have been probably Gus Forsling that would have been picked by the Seattle Kraken in that expansion draft had that happened. And of course, Bill Zito was kind of playing defense as far as that when it comes to that. And Kobe Guy had an interesting tweet today about Patric Hornqvist. I want to actually read it. That made me that made me cringe a little bit when I saw it. And it's nothing against Patric Hornqvist, the human being. Let's not forget that these players are human beings. And this is the tweet that Kobe Guy had. Quote, if both Claude Giroux and Mason Marchment walk in free agency, I honestly would not be surprised if Patric Hornqvist moves back up to the top/middle six role at some point. Unless they find a cheap plug-and-play options that strive in those roles, it would have to happen. Close quote. And I cringed a little bit seeing that because of the amount of UFAs still that are going to be walking out in those roster spots that need to be filled. So I'm not quite sure if I agree. Nothing against Kobe, but I don't know if I agree with that because of the whole the age showed with Patric Hornqvist. He was downgraded to power play too. Of course, the Panthers were still kind of that up and coming team going into 2021. Before that season started, I predicted that the Panthers probably would have been like fourth or fifth, a bubble playoff team in 2021 in the Central Division, but they exceeded those expectations. They brought in those reinforcements: Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Brandon Montour, and now they put in an up as like they're kind of like in an upper echelon now. So, and Patric Hornqvist is that veteran leader who's going to be playing lesser minutes now. The age really showed last year, and of course the downgrading of the lines there, and of course the reality is we still live in a flat cap world with COVID. And like we said, not a lot of money to go around, and it's still a very big crunch that the Panthers have.
Yeah, there's just not that much to spend, and I think that's why we're seeing a free agency where so many like big names are hitting the market. It's just because the teams don't have the money to retain them. I mean, I never thought I'd see a day where Evgeni Malkin is on the open market because Pittsburgh wasn't able to extend him and Chris Letang. Claude Giroux, again, not in Philly, but he's hitting the open market presumably tomorrow unless an extension happens. Johnny Gaudreau is a guy who's hitting the open market. This is an era right now, a situation in the cap where teams just don't have it to throw these monster offers to keep their guys. So makes it for a little bit more entertaining, but in a position like the Panthers are in, we don't have necessarily the cap space to get involved in that. It makes it more difficult on a team like the Panthers, who are a contender, to keep their group together. So it's going to be a really interesting day. I think Hornqvist, of course, is the key. He has shown his age, not just this season, but last season. Got off to a pretty hot start and then really trailed off the second half of the year. And then last year was probably a higher end fourth line player, but he was a fourth line player, and I don't think he would have been as successful on any of the other lines given the pace the Panthers have begun to play with. I don't think putting him back in the top six or middle six role is great for him at this stage in his career. I don't think it's great for the Panthers either. I think you're going to lose a lot of production that way because you're looking at either putting him on a line with Bennett, Barkov, or Lundell. Those are three centers who are high octane, and it's a lot of speed, a lot of puck cycling, a lot of skill, stuff that Hornqvist is not necessarily known for at this stage in his career. So definitely not a situation where it's impossible to move him like Keith Yandel. Yandel had negative value at the time that we were looking to move him. He was probably one of the worst defensemen in the league, and a massive cap hit, and had 2 years left. With Hornqvist, it's an expiring contract, still has some positive value on the ice, still a great leader. I think he'll be on the move.
Yeah, and I want to go to a comment that from Indade talking about what George Richards said on Big O show, saying how Zito is looking for another Verhage. There's a few players that weren't qualified offers in the NHL. Ilya Mikheyev wasn't qualified and offer a 20-goal scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He wasn't qualified. And Sonny Milano, who from the Anaheim Ducks, he was another RFA that was not qualified and offer. Sonny Milano was the one who scored the goal from the first Trevor Zegras Michigan goal. So 220 goal scorers who could fill out the bottom six. I don't know what they're looking at as far as compensation, but hey, that could be the Florida Panthers' opportunity to get someone that they didn't see a fit somewhere. But hey, it could be somewhere for the Panthers as far as helping them succeed and putting them in taking their game possibly to a next level. But we're going to transition over to the next segment where we're going to continue the conversation of a player that we mentioned earlier in the show, Evgeni Malkin. A possibility that he could be coming to the Panthers. We're going to discuss that more in the next segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Rock Auto. And with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, and even 100% more on the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you can need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And this is a conversation that I never thought that we would be having just a few weeks ago. And Evgeni Malkin, I thought that a deal was going to get done with him. And of course, we heard all the rumors this week. He feels disrespected. Sidney Crosby goes to his South Florida home to discuss what his state of mind. Malkin saying that the Penguins don't think that he's good anymore. And of course, Panther fans for quite a little bit of time were talking about Malkin to Florida because he does own property down here. But if the Panthers happen to miss out on Claude Giroux and Mason Marchment, it's weird because Paul Bissonnette spoke about earlier today how he could see Florida as a favorite to land Evgeni Malkin. And nowhere in that sentence did Paul Bissonnette say, sources tell me. I saw that statement as more of a prediction more than anything. And who knows who Paul Bissonnette has spoken to in NHL circles. Of course, he's on the TNT crew. And of getting Malkin to Florida, it sounds great, but the last 2 seasons with the durability issues that Malkin has, I don't know how much. The best ability is availability. And of course, he was a point per game player when he did play last season. But I'm a little concerned about the injuries when it comes to Malkin.
Yeah, definitely. That's the biggest question mark as far as his game at this stage in his career is can he stay on the ice? It seems like a yearly thing. He misses a significant amount of time. It's gotten to a point in Pittsburgh where they kind of just expect him for about 60 games a year. That's not great for the Panthers if you're going to make a big money investment into somebody. Panthers don't exactly have big money to spend, but I could see him being a replacement if we miss out on Giroux and Marchment. He can still produce, especially in Duclair's absence. I feel like he's a good player on the top 6. He's at this stage in his career, he's kind of become a power play merchant to an extent. but nothing wrong with that. The Panthers have enough 5-on-5 offense to create for him, and I think on the power play he's absolutely lethal. Gives the Panthers that one-timer threat that they are missing on the left side, or a left-handed shot on the right side. So I could see it being a fit. I don't know if you play him as a center the remainder of his career. His face-off numbers are not great. And the Panthers are just so loaded down the middle with Barkov, Bennett, and Lundell. I could really see him moving out to the wing for the rest of his career if he does land in a place like Florida. But he's also a proven playoff performer, so it's another thing to consider there. That just the biggest issue is just his health. I mean, I really have liked the idea of Malkin playing for the Panthers for some time. I think the rumors have been there several off seasons that he would get traded here or end up here somewhere. I could see it happening. And again, these are veteran guys who have won before. If he wants another great shot at a Stanley Cup, this is a destination that would have to entice him. But it doesn't hurt to dream a little about possibly getting him. And how about just like an NHL 22 scenario where you get him and Giroux at crazy discounts, keep Marchment, and we have a super team. Crazy things happen.
and when you think about the resume for Evgeni Malkin, a Calder Trophy winner, a Conn Smythe winner, two-time Art Ross winner, a Hart Trophy winner, all that, and has been in the top 10 a few times in the Selke voting as well. And last season, half of his points came on the power play, so that could be helpful with Duclair's absence, like you mentioned earlier. So that could be a situation where they could possibly make it work too, and say, hey, this is a team that won the President's Trophy. But at the same time, Malkin's looking for term, and are the Panthers willing to give a 35-year-old veteran? I know he's won 3 Stanley Cups. Are they willing to give him the term that he wants? And Bill Zito has been very, I don't know if stubborn is the right word. I don't want to call it stubborn, because I actually do agree with Bill Zito if he does not want to give Malkin term. He's been very for Zito, he's been very sure about saying nobody gets term outside of these certain players, about who's going to get term and who's not going to get term. And I don't think Malkin is going to get anything more than 4 years if he signs with the Panthers.
Yeah, I think in a lot of Zito signings, price has not been an issue. He hasn't been that much of an issue, negotiator on price. I think for the most part, people get their AAV that they're looking for here. But yeah, like you said, he's not a guy who's going to handicap himself 5, 6, 7 years down the line. He hands out contracts in the 3-year range, 4-year range. Like you said, he's a little bit stingy when it comes to term on these contracts, because he wants that flexibility. And again, we're talking about a team that's going to have to extend Huberdeau. There have been discussions about extending Weegar, but extending Huberdeau and Weegar is going to be a really, really tall order. So the flexibility has to be there, and signing a guy like Malkin for too long is just going to be that would really limit their options. I feel like it would be kind of a short-sighted move if you have to tie up too much money into a 4 or 5 year contract for a guy of that age. It could really hurt you on the back end and end up closing your Stanley Cup window. So you have to be very careful about it.
Yeah, and when you look at cap friendly right now, and when you think of where their cap is 2 years from now, we mentioned earlier in the show about Darling's cap hit coming off, and a majority of Keith Yandel's cap hit being off the books. I see right now $26 million in cap space. You subtract Huberdeau's extension, which we're expecting around the $10 million range, maybe even more than Barkov's. If we get to $6.5 million deal AAV, you're talking about another 6, so 10. And of course, this is the big one, Spencer Knight. He's gonna be qualified and offered for damn sure that he's going to. And of course, next season will be that season to entertain even more trades for Sergei Bobrovsky. Reports say that Bobrovsky, to trade Sergei Bobrovsky for the Panthers has slowed down, and that Zito isn't looking in that direction anymore. But then I look at today, I was looking at the Ottawa Senators cap friendly page after they traded for Cam Talbot, and of course they extended Anton Forsberg during the trade deadline last season. And they have a pretty decent goalie tandem at less than $7 million. I'm like, that's how you build your goalie tandem right there. I'm not saying that they're a playoff team next year, but Pierre Dorian, he might be up to something.
Yeah, I think Ottawa has quietly had one of the best off seasons in the league. You get DeBrincat, and you don't even have to part with any players, like NHL ready players, any like elite prospects. They traded a pick, a combination of picks, and got DeBrincat. That's a 40 goal scorer who hasn't even entered his prime yet. That's a big move. Their goaltending, they've quietly put together a really, really solid pair in goal. They got rid of Matt Murray. They've had a really solid offseason. I think that's a team that's going to challenge for a wild card spot this year, and they're definitely on the rise. But the Panthers, I mean, that's the direction you have to look, just to see the kind of payroll you want in your goalie tandem. I don't think you really want to go much higher than what they've invested in their goalie tandem, and the Panthers are definitely over that by a few millions. And if you're going to have to extend Spencer Knight, which of course you're going to do, you're going to qualify him an offer, you're going to give him probably a bridge contract as an RFA. Now you're looking at probably 12 to 13 million in your goalie tandem. That's a lot of money to invest in two goalies. And you don't want to keep Bob too long and cripple Spencer Knight's development, because he needs games. He can only develop so much as a backup, and in the AHL level, the competition is not as high as he needs it to be. So at some point you have to give the crease to Spencer Knight, and you don't want to be paying $10 million for a backup goalie. So I think next offseason is the time where the push to trade Bobrovsky really heats up. And if that can be done, now you've opened up a ton of money. You've opened up a ton of wiggle room to extend the Panthers Cup window, be able to retain some players, add to them. I think next offseason, trading Bob is going to be the highest priority. And that's not a knock on him at all. He's really played great the past year. I expect him to play well next year as well. It's not a knock on his performance at all. It's just the contract is so large, and it weighs down the Panthers' book so much. It's something that they're going to have to look into making happen next offseason for sure.
Yeah, and for Bobrovsky, like you said, we don't hate the human being. We just hate the cap hit for the Panthers. And it's and going back to Ottawa, man, just looking at that, it's just man. And the fact that trading Matt Murray just for Toronto, for Ottawa, just moving up a few just to get that contract, and it's crazy because I've never seen a 2-time Stanley Cup champion goalie get so much heat that Matt Murray has had. And of course, there was burned bridges during his time in Ottawa, and his performance since he won those 2 cups has just gone down for him, and of course the injuries for him. Cap Friendly said that about 40% of their transactions in the last few years have been Matt Murray, and yeah, I don't know if Toronto got better with that trade.
I personally feel like they did not. I really don't think they did. I know Ottawa retained some salary, so there is that. It's not like they took on the full contract, but Toronto, you're probably better off throwing that amount of money to try to keep Jack Campbell. I really don't know what you're thinking, making that move to bring Matt Murray into the fold. He's a guy who's got clear weaknesses. It's well known that his glove hand is not up to par. People shoot on his glove side all the time. He's had extensive injury history. Hasn't really had a good season since his cup years in Pittsburgh. So it's just, I don't really know what they're what the goal is there, and maybe they feel they can rebuild him back to what he was. Toronto does have a pretty solid D-core now. They've definitely improved defensively. It's a much better defense than what Ottawa has, but I don't know. I mean, it's still a team that gives up some chances because of just the offensive style they play. If you're asking Matt Murray to bail you out, that's that's a pretty questionable decision to make there for sure.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they saw the Colorado Avalanche, how they won a Stanley Cup despite of Darcy Kemper. And some people feel that the Pittsburgh Penguins won those 2 cups in spite of Matt Murray, because he didn't even play in every single playoff game that during those 2 cup runs with Pittsburgh. There was a few Marc-Andre Fleury starts in between all that. So the court of public opinion when it comes to Matt Murray is that Pittsburgh, of course, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, of course, those 3 superstars, you're gonna just, regardless who their goalie is, at least in most years, you're gonna have a chance to win every year. And it looks like that Jack Campbell could be heading to Edmonton. And let's finish off on this. And also, speaking of Darcy Kemper, right before we finish, it looks like that he's rumored to be heading to Washington. So it's looking, and Samsonov was not qualified an offer for the Washington Capitals. But let's finish on this. We talked about Mason Marchment earlier, his connections with Edmonton. His father, who just recently passed, Brian Marchment, played for the Edmonton Oilers the year that Mason was born. Brian played 4 years with the Edmonton Oilers, so there's a little bit of connection there over there in Alberta. And if they're able to sign Marchment, and along with signing Jack Campbell, who was pretty good last year with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the beginning of the season, fell off a little bit towards the end of the season, but still he's an upgrade over Mike Smith there. We could really see Edmonton as a pretty decent threat to possibly make it to the Stanley Cup final even next year.
Yeah, I think if they do poach Marchment from here in Florida, I think he's a fantastic fit with the Oilers. He gives you, like you said, a lot of the flexibility that we've kind of gotten used to with him. He's able to play on any line. He can play any style. But he gives you kind of a duplicate of what they have in Zach Hyman. I think if they do sign Marchment, it pushes them out of the Evander Kane reunion a little bit. I don't know if they keep Kane long term and then also get Marchment as well as Jack Campbell. That's a lot. But he gives you a lot of what Zach Hyman gives you, and if you can put Hyman with McDavid and Marchment with Draisaitl, or the other way around, I feel like Marchment is a Zach Hyman prototype. I think they're very similar in their play style, and I think both guys could be really successful with the kind of skill that Edmonton has. And Marchment is exactly the type of player you want in the playoffs. Edmonton really ran out of gas in that series against Colorado. No one was going to keep up with Colorado, but Edmonton just did not have the grit necessary. They could match their skill a little bit, but it was the depth goals. The bottom of the lineup guys, it was McDavid and Draisaitl did everything they could. They can only carry you so far. Marchment is the perfect complementary player that you're looking for. So if he does end up there, it's a great story. His dad played there. The loss of Brian Marchment is tragic for the NHL. And it would be a fantastic story for him to play for another team that his dad did play for. But yeah, if he does end up there, I wish him nothing but the best. I want very, very badly to keep him here. But I could really see him being successful there in Edmonton if that's the direction it goes.
Yeah, and like we said, we cheer for we cheer for the human beings as well, even though we're Panther fans, and hoping the best for Marchment. And even if he takes a little bit with his free agent decision due to the grieving process, much respect to him. And the Oilers, they have $15 million cap space right now. Of course, they still have to figure out what they're going to do with Jesse Puljujarvi as well, to see what's going to happen there. Is he going to stick around, or is he going to be traded as well? So lots of decisions to be made for multiple teams. And listen, 24 hours from now, we could be having a completely different conversation on not only the Panthers, but the whole state of the NHL, with the no pun intended avalanche of possible signings. But Jacob, I want to thank you for joining on this Winans Wednesday and live edition on the YouTube edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me online on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8, on PantherParkway.com as well. And Panther fans, rest assured, no matter what happens tomorrow, the Panthers still have the core in place, and the Panthers are going to be competitive regardless. This is a good team, no matter what direction we go in tomorrow.
Could have said it better myself, my dude. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, where they'll be covering all the offseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL will be covering every free agent signing, who won free agency, who lost free agency, who's going to be that team to take the leap to the next level. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So Armando Velez with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.